Hey, welcome NHL. I'm sorry, I do a football show. Let me do this one more time. Welcome NHL hockey fans. It's that time again. Time for another episode of Talkin' Hockey. I'm your host, Charles E. Smith Jr. This is an Inside Sports production presented to you by Humanica Media, and hopefully everybody has downloaded the Podbean app on your smartphone. Take us with you wherever you go. This is the Eastern Conference preview. The Stanley Cup playoffs are in full swing. We're going to break down the second round. We've got the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Boston Bruins locking horns on one side, and then on the other side, old rivals renewing an acquaintance, and that is the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Washington Capitals, although I think for a rivalry, the other side has to win one at some point. But anyways, it's called a rivalry just because it happens so often. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. As you know, I don't break this thing down alone. I do enlist the help of the very, very best. And sometimes you got to go all the way to Eastern Canada. You know how many folks I had to pass up to find this gem in Eastern Canada, a goaltending authority, the man with a lightning quick glove hand, and a great authority on NHL hockey, none other than Lightning Lonnie Schwartz. By the way, follow him on Twitter at the Schwartz 5454. That's the Schwartz, SCHWARTZ 5454. Lonnie, what's going on out there, man?
After an introduction like that, and all your introductions, I must say, are spectacular. I feel as though the next things out of your mouth are going to be, come on down, you're the next contestant. That's how good of a sell you do. And I just hope that the good listener is sitting there going, man, I'm glad he heads out to Canada for this because, you know, I'm really happy to join you, talk hockey with you, and maybe take a couple of stray paths that the mainstream media kind of bypasses sometimes when they're analyzing this game we call hockey.
Right. We got to give the backstory and the things that, well, some people, let's face it, they're just kind of afraid to say. But you know what? When you talk about the sell, remember, it's not a sell if it's true. I'm just telling the truth about you. And no one breaks it down like you do. And very proud to have you as a partner on this show. But hey, one thing we got to talk about before we get into the matchups, you know, the awards are coming out. They're announcing the Vezina and Norris and everything else, all culminating in the Hart Trophy in about, in a few more days here. But the Mark Messier Leadership Award, by the way, no longer presented by Bridgestone. You got the three finalists. You got Blake Wheeler, who is captain of the Winnipeg Jets. Then you got Derek England, alternate for the Vegas Golden Knights, which that's what everyone is there. But curiously, you got Wayne Simmons, who's up for the Leadership Award. Now, to be up for a leadership award when you're not even the captain of your own team, what does that say about perhaps the power structure of the team that you're playing for? And also, we had Claude Giroux, who just came out and said that somehow the Philadelphia fans booing actually affected the team in the playoffs as they got bounced by the Pittsburgh Penguins. So I'm not saying that you should let media or anyone else pick your team captain. But well, you see a shakeup there possibly in Philly. I'm not saying Giroux gets traded, but, you know, we've seen the letters taken off sweaters there in Philly before. I remember that happened with Eric Desjardins. He had a nice career there in Philly. Started out scoring a hat trick for your Montreal Canadiens in 1993, leading them to the Stanley Cup over my LA Kings. But, you know, I'm over it. My therapist says I'm over it.
I want to talk about that trade. Okay, I don't want to talk about that trade.
You traded John LeClair too.
Went where?
But anyways,
I'm not talking about that trade right now because I'm going to get really worked up. And I just want to. I know you're talking about Wayne Simmons.
Yes, let's stay there.
And the misnamed trophy. It should be the Stephen Gregory Yzerman Greatest Leader of All Time in the History of Existence Award for leadership. But I digress.
It's a lot of stuff.
And it's a bit of a long name. It's not a good sell, whether or not Bridgestone is presenting it or not. But the fact of the matter is, you bring up Wayne Simmons, who I found out, and maybe I'm reading one of those obscure, and I just caught the headline sites where at the beginning of the season, he had like a pelvic issue, a torn leg, like injuries that you would have thought you're pressing pause on the season for. And then once you come in healthy, for the playoffs. Well, healthy is a loose term in the National Hockey League when it comes to playoff competition, but it's like this explains a lot for his season because I play fantasy hockey. I got a couple of keeper teams. Wayne Simmons last year, beast mode every game, land hits, scoring goals, power play performance, left wing, right wing. He could have played from the rafters. The guy was playing out of his mind all season. This year, he kind of regressed a little bit, and you're sitting there wondering why. This is a very versatile, very rare type of player, a power forward that harkens back to the days of the 80s and 90s where like every team had one. And like this is a guy that doesn't have to fight because his reputation is such that, okay, there are fighters in the league, and then there are guys you just don't want to fight. Wayne Simmons has been listed as one of those guys that he may not have the title of enforcer, but he is the last guy you want to fight, even if you are an enforcer. So we're talking about a guy who's got great physical skills, great offensive capabilities, yet played a season fairly injured. And some people are saying, I don't think that's necessarily brave when you have the opportunity to get better, one, and then two, you're going to help your team even more because let's not forget, Philly didn't have the best start to the season.
Right.
So them getting into the playoffs is a big deal. Claude Giroux having a massive bounce back year is also a big deal. I don't think Claude Giroux is the kind of guy you strip a C off of. He's been the captain for quite some time now. And on top of that, he's speaking the truth. I mean, and if Philly fans don't like their reputation of being the worst fans in sports, well, then stop acting like the worst fans in sports. You know, it's one thing to accept it, but it's another thing for the captain to be like, all right, guys, like, you might not want to boo us. We're in the playoffs this year.
But then again, did you see the way that they played in a few of those games? And the last game, honestly, you know what? And the worst part is the Flyers are my second most favorite team. I like the Kings first and the Flyers. But that last game, that elimination game, they were up 4-2. And I mean, have you seen that many turnovers at this level ever? Just stuff you coach Pee-wee teams not to do. And it was just egregious turnover, one after another, after another, after another.
It just turnovers in the offensive zone. And we're not even talking at the blue line. We're talking about the hash marks.
Right.
To the uninitiated, if you do not know what a hash mark is, that is not some sort of drug paraphernalia permanently on the ice. It's that those little slashes on the sides of the circles, on the outside and the inside of those circles, that's what a hash mark is. When you're turning one over on the outside hash, and you can say it was a trip all you want, it's a pass right up the gut where no one's in the high slot, laser beam into the net, and there you get your momentum shifting, and you get Jake Gensel, who forgot what offense was like in the regular season, scoring 4 straight goals to put his team ahead. Right. One guy, Jake Gensel, who had a spectacular playoff last year, had a regular season, and then goes and scores 4. I mean, let's put it this way, though. Let's not totally lay the blame on how Philly might have performed and collapsed. We're also talking about the Pittsburgh Penguins, whom a lot of people picked to three-peat. I cannot remember the last team to three-peat, not the Edmonton Oilers have to be the last team. What's that?
They never did it. It was the New York Islanders who got 4 straight.
The Islanders and before them that three-peated, because you're right. You mentioned that it was an interruption. So it was the Islanders that are the last team to three-peat as champions because the Red Wings only did it back-to-back, right? That's the last team prior to Pittsburgh just doing it, winning back-to-back. So we've gone nearly 40 years since a three-peat champion. And this is a team that just beat the Flyers without Malkin. And now they're going into game 1 against the Caps without Malkin.
And so without Carl Hagelin. Carl Hagelin's will be missing too. Yes.
And that was based on a huge hit from the aforementioned captain, at least currently, of the Philadelphia Flyers, Claude Giroux.
Right.
So, I mean, speaking to Wayne Simmons being nominated as leader, I don't know if I would put him up there, but he is. Had a good season. not as good as last year. So, I mean, I'm kind of scratching my head if he was the one who led them there to the promised land in the playoffs. Claude Giroux did a pretty remarkable job this year. So
Giroux has a sick amount of talent. That's undeniable. But leadership is an intangible thing. Yeah. And it's one of those things. That's what I always said about, watch the Sharks out here with Patrick Marleau had the C on his jersey. And it's like, I know Patrick Marleau, interviewed him, met him. He's not going to lead you to storm the beachhead at Normandy. He just isn't, even though he's a great hockey player. So
I think out of all the guys listed, I mean, the sentimental story, just to touch on that award, Derek Englund, Las Vegas resident, having a very heartwarming speech towards the beginning of the season after the tragedy that did happen in Vegas. Mm-hmm. And then you've got Blake Wheeler, though, who has led his team to a record season, whom everyone on the team says, you think he's given 100% on day one. Oh, that's 100% day one. 100% changes on day two. Like every day of the season, they were talking about him as if it was like he was a new man, better than he was the day before. And so on that award, I don't know if I'm going to place Simmons amongst a group like that, especially when you're comparing him to the likes of what Wheeler did for the Jets and how Derek Englund was that emotional leader for a brand new franchise. Little side note, by the way, if I'm remembering correctly about Derek Englund's career, Derek Englund played in Pittsburgh, did he not?
Most definitely.
Derek Englund was brought in, and this is me throwing a little shade on Sidney when he was younger. Pittsburgh wasn't exactly what you would call a physically intimidating team. So they signed Derek Englund, bring him onto the team, help afford a little protection deterrence for one Sidney Crosby. They sit down in the meeting. They say, Sid, this is Derek. We brought him in. He's kind of going to shadow you a little bit, offer some protection. And Sid basically got up and walked out the room with barely a thank you or a hello. Like, that's how green Sid was. And that's how little he thought of Derek Englund those many years ago. And I mean, I've got the fly on the wall skinny on this. So it was, it was just interesting because I'm not saying that's Sidney Crosby now. That's young.
Crosby had a lot of growing up to do. And I remember when if you remember 2008 Stanley Cup final when the Detroit Red Wings beat them and he didn't go through the handshake line. It's because he didn't understand and I think he had a lot of growing to do. And unfortunately for Sidney, a lot of that stuff followed him through his entire career. And there are a lot of people who can't forgive him for things that happened way back when. But let's say it's safe to say, I think he was quite immature in a lot of different ways when he came into the league. Highly touted, but he didn't have the respect overall for the league and the legacy that he was joining when he came to the NHL. I think we can say that for Sidney. He has grown since, even though there are people who just will hate the man until the day he dies. But
and we've seen the maturation process. Like, his nickname is still Sid the Kid, and he carries himself much different. The interesting thing too is like he roomed with Mario Lemieux. Mm-hmm. When he first came to the league. If you didn't know, you know now that he needed a home to stay in Pittsburgh. And of course, the owner and the magnificent one said, well, I think I have a few spare bedrooms in my palatial palace. So he stayed there. And what shocked me is that there wasn't that maturity and respect almost instantly because he was being nurtured by Lemieux. But we're talking a decade later now. This is a different player. This is the best player in the world. And it affords us a really good, this is, if you're paying attention and you're an aspiring broadcaster, this is a brilliant segue opportunity because Sidney Crosby is the best player in the world. Sidney Crosby is leading the NHL in playoff points at 13. Jake Gensel, after that monster game, he's tied with Sidney Crosby. And this is a guy who's going to take the team on his back and do what needs to get done. Derek Brassard's there now as their depth at center. He may not be a Cullen, but he's definitely adding to that element of the team. Phil Kessel has stepped up. He's making plays, generating offense, maybe not scoring as many goals that we're as accustomed to, but he's making plays, and I love it when he gets mad. Because I just say, that's it, Wicket. That's it. You just yell at Han Solo and Princess Leia like that and wait till that golden android starts speaking your language to calm you down, because Phil Kessel is the most angry, awesome-looking Ewok ever.
I get kind of jealous of Phil Kessel, because I remember back when I was in my athletic prime, and all the things I did to just stay in great shape. And then I watched Phil Kessel, and I'm like, that's a professional athlete, and
here's the deal.
It's not fair, man. It's not fair.
You can look at it and say not fair, and I don't disagree. If I looked at that guy, I would say that is a pudgy Ewok. There is no way that man walks into training camp as the best conditioned forward or a former fastest skater. There is no way. You cannot sell me that. That is fake news. That is alternative facts. That is every single thing you make up to say that is not reality. Wherein it is reality. And it's amazing. I love it. There was an article that came out about Phil Kessel and just how perfectly he fits in Pittsburgh. No expectation of leadership. He just walks in, he chirps, he scores goals, he sets up plays. Everyone loves the guy. There's not one player that was interviewed that was like, Phil, he's this. It's like, no, he makes us laugh our ass off. He is the best guy in the dressing room. We love Phil Kessel. So you know what? They ran him out of town here in Toronto, but he is the man that they look to for a little levity and some leadership that doesn't look as though they still need implants or extra strength Rogaine to just get the facial hair going during the playoffs. Of course, I'm talking again about Sidney Crosby. So anyways.
He hath the patchy beard of a prepubescent squire. This is true. So, you know what? Let's go ahead and get into that this series, since we're already there in Pittsburgh and Washington. In case you don't know the history, in the history of the two franchises, they've met 10 times in the playoffs. The Pittsburgh Penguins have won 9 of those 10, and every of the 5 Stanley Cups the Penguins have won in their history, all 5 times, they beat the Washington Capitals in one of the rounds on their way to the Stanley Cup. So here's what we've got. The Penguins still beat up from that Philadelphia series, coming into game 1 against the Capitals. No Evgeny Malkin, no Carl Hagelin. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to affect them through the whole series, but the Capitals, to me, this puts all the pressure on the Capitals, because bottom line is this. If you can't beat the Penguins in one game with Malkin and Hagelin out of the lineup, what are your chances when they come back? So that said, Lonnie, how do you see this one?
Well, first of all, let's talk about the previous round. Our hearts were right. Our hearts were like Celine Dion. They went on and on for the Washington Capitals. So our hearts overcame our logic-minded noodles, the gray matter between the ears. The Columbus Blue Jackets fell 4 straight games. They won the first 2 in Washington, and Washington showing a degree of fortitude we haven't seen from that team. And it almost seemed as though it was like, all right, we're going to give Grubauer the shot. We're going to give Philip Grubauer the shot to be our starting goalie in the playoffs. And a game and 3/4 into it, it was like, well, that's an experiment we can't afford to keep playing with. So we're going to put in our Vezina Trophy winning goaltender, Braden Holtby, who has been what they needed, that calming influence that you need from the crease out. And then on top of that, you've got Carlson, not Erik Karlsson, but John backing up the blue line for them. In spelt differently, by the way, Carlson, just in case you're like, oh, they got to be related. No, John Carlson is not related to Erik Karlsson. But if you're looking at the scoring race here right now, I'm going to read these off. 9th, Carlson. 10th, Ovechkin. 11th, Kuznetsov. Scroll down to 13, and there's Backstrom. These are the names that we have been touting that needed to step up. Not named Ovechkin, mind you, because he's always been a very consistent playoff performer. But it's his line mates, or sorry, his teammates like Kuznetsov and Backstrom that you need to alleviate some of that offensive pressure. And Backstrom, of course, scored the game-winning goal in overtime against the Columbus Blue Jackets. So it's really good to see that there are more names than just Ovechkin contributing on the score sheet now. You also, like I said, have Braden Holtby playing like the Braden Holtby we remember. Because last playoff, I generalized. I give myself the 2 minutes of shame in the box because I kind of threw him under the bus. But he only had a lousy playoff last year. Previous playoff performances, he was like peanut butter and jelly smashed together for a perfect sandwich. Nobody wanted to eat it. That was the problem. Braden Holtby, top-tier goaltender playing like it. You're getting good enough more than good enough defense, and the offense is woken up. So here we go again. Who am I going to listen to? You just laid out the numbers. You just told everyone 9 out of 10 times. That's the exception right there. Do we start a new 10 where 9 out of 10 times? You know, the 90% rule. Does Washington start fresh on the new 10 pack and go, we're setting a new tone. We're going to win this series. But then you look numerically. Then you look from top to bottom. And you see Matt Murray, who is also a great playoff goaltender, and you say to yourself, okay, I want Washington to win. My heart, it's beating through its chest as if there's no rib cage. I want them to win so badly. But then there's the best player in the world saying, Ovi, I love you. You're a great goal scorer. A lot of people argued who the better one was between the two of us. And I know you're still the greatest goal scorer of this generation, but brother, let's put the argument to bed. Overall, you know I'm the best. And I'm going to carry this team. And once Malkin comes back, I can't, like, my head is screaming saying, just say Pittsburgh. But my heart is angry again because it's like, you should have listened to me. You should have listened to me. I told you they're going to beat Columbus, and you didn't listen. I'm really mad at you now. Most people say I'm heartless, so it really doesn't matter. I have to listen to my head again. I said Pittsburgh is in all likelihood going to be a three-peat champion, and they can't do that if they bow out to Washington now. So I'm sorry, Ovi. You know I love you. If you happen to be listening, if you happen to be tuning into the podcast, I love you. You put me in your DVD for crying out loud. But I got to go with the Pittsburgh Penguins because just overall, how do you deny that team? Top to bottom.
From what I understand, I believe Ovechkin, has he ever been past the second round of the playoffs? Has he ever? I don't think so. I don't think he has.
Unless it was the time that no, they didn't. Because, no, they didn't. Nope. I can't see that he has gone that far. I was overthinking, but no.
These are the reigning Stanley Cup champions, defending Stanley Cup champions, who won the championship. By the way, champions figure out a way to get it done. They won last year's championship without Letang. Let's just remember that. They didn't have him. So much like the Patriots winning the Super Bowl without Gronk, against Atlanta. So it doesn't matter. You can take a piece away. You took away Malkin and Hagelin. Will they figure out a way to get it done? Even if Malkin, it turns out that injury is a little more severe than we think, because remember, he got injured in game 5 against Philly, didn't play in game 6. And now he's still out for game 1. So it may be something significant. But I remember, and going back to championship teams, 2001, the Colorado Avalanche, the big thing was they had Sakic and Forsberg in the lineup. Best 1-2 center combination in the league. What happens? They lose Peter Forsberg to a ruptured spleen and still win the Stanley Cup without Forsberg. These are the Penguins. They have a championship pedigree. They are going to go through Washington. And, hey, it's the Penguins. And I feel sorry for the Capitals fans because they are some of the most loyal and dedicated, and they love that team, and they have high hopes, and they stand behind them 100%. But I just don't see it happening. I got the Penguins, and I think the Penguins are going to take them in, I think, probably 5 or 6 games. I don't even see it going 7. Yeah, I got the Penguins.
I could see it going. I could see it going 7 because of the way that Washington overcame adversity and they're showing some real toughness mentally. They didn't let 2 games get them down on home ice, I might add.
Right.
So Washington, I got to give a little bit of credit to. They beat the best goalie in the world right now in Sergei Bobrovsky. And Bobrovsky, I mean, look, some people were pointing fingers, and I'm sitting there on, how do you blame Bobrovsky? There were goals that were getting scored just in the red zone, Johnny on the spot, in tight in the slot, no coverage, or just a goal that was like, that was a perfect shot or a perfect situation. So I'm not placing any of this on Bobrovsky. But
right.
Now, you just like we said, too good of a team that they're facing. My heart, the caveat in this, my heart says Washington. But my head is in agreement, but I think this is going to be another tight one. I think this is going to go 7. I think this is going to be one of those where it's really hard fought and the offense is equally spread out this time around. I think Washington has a shot to really push him.
Well, you know what? And I say this for the Caps, and we all love to be right about things. And I said it's going to go 5 or 6, but Washington Capitals, for the love of hockey, you have to beat the Penguins in Game 1. You just have to do it.
Send them.
You have to. I'm going to be, even though I picked against them, I'm going to be sorely disappointed if Washington doesn't take Game 1.
I'm with you.
You've got a handicap there.
My heart will ache.
Yes.
I'm 40 now, so it doesn't need that kind of extra stress. It just doesn't. All right. I've led the life of a goaltender. I might look youthful in appearance, minus the gray and the beard, but the inside, it's all like cranky and barely functional.
You need to lay off that pastrami.
What's that?
Lay off the pastrami, man.
That's a good tip. There's some good deli in Toronto. So, yeah, and really good pastrami. So, yeah, I'll lay off of that.
All right. I'm sure Phil Kessel hung out there when he played for the Maple Leafs. But let's go ahead and get on to the other series, and that is the Boston Bruins, who polished off those pesky Toronto Maple Leafs in 7 games. They finally get through. Their reward, they get to face the firepower of the Tampa Bay Lightning. And, one of the things about this matchup, we can get into, how they beat the Maple Leafs. But with the Bruins, I just wonder, there may be a nervousness here with when I look at the coach, and everything happens from the top down. I think that players kind of reflect what the coach is feeling. Mr. Cassidy, honestly, Game 7, and I understand you can always overanalyze and analyze and double think and second guess yourself and whatever, but why would you start your 4th line at home against in an elimination game? Wound up giving up a power play because they got caught behind the play because Matthews and the boys got on the ice, and it's against the 4th line, and Toronto goes up 1-0. Fortunately, it turns out okay. But seriously, you got this line. You got Bergeron, Marchand, and Pasternak, arguably the best line in hockey. When you're playing at home in an elimination game, if nothing else but for the fans and the momentum and everything, you start your top line. Come on, man. Start your 4th line.
As much as you'd want to do that, the advantage you have as the home team, though, is you're the last one to change lines.
I get that.
So and in classic form, and this isn't the first time or the last time it's going to happen, the purpose generally of your 4th line is a shutdown kind of line.
Correct.
Where you're going to have enough faith in that 4th line, you know what? I don't care if they score 1 goal all year as a unit. I'm putting them out there because they're the Selke unit. They can put enough pressure in the offensive zone, but it's in the defensive zone that a 4th line typically shines.
Correct.
That's their purpose. A 4th line is generally your shutdown line. And marry that with the opportunity to be the last one to change lines on, that to me is the strategy. Sure, you want to come out and say, yeah, we want to get our top line out and scoring, but they're going to eventually come out when they're assigned to come out. You want a line match? Good luck, Babcock. I've got the first right to say, oh, no, we're not going top line for top line. I'm putting out my 4th line against you guys. So it's line management. It's coaching strategy. And while it might have backfired initially, look what ends up happening through the rest of the game. I mean, I happened to be working for most of that game because hockey never sleeps. I do teach goaltenders, but the game started late enough so I could catch most of the second period. The TV was on at the arena, folks. Don't you dare lose your mind. There was a proper television to catch the hockey before I got in my car.
It's Canada. It's Canada. Hockey is going to be on wherever you go, and especially it's the Maple Leafs.
Oh,
and that is the center of the hockey universe there, Toronto, even though they haven't won a cup since '67. But that is the center of the hockey universe, people.
Hard to argue it at this point because the last 25 years for the Montreal Canadiens haven't exactly been stellar. But then again, you could say the same for the Leafs. But currently, they are one of the young gems in the game. They faltered. There's a lot of blame going on right now. I mean, we can talk about the Leafs side initially. Jake Gardiner, who was a trade acquisition, young hockey player quite a few years ago. I do believe it was through the Phil Kessel trade that they acquired his rights, although I could be off on that. The guy's, I don't want to say he's a liability because having looked at the regular season, he did have a very strong statistical, Corsi-friendly regular season, right? The actuaries are looking and going, well, statistically, he had really good numbers when it was 5-on-5 and odd man, penalty killing and power play. So he did all right there. I'm trying to sound studious now. He did all right there. Mm-hmm. But then come the playoffs, Jake Gardiner forgot that he's a defenseman. And he wasn't covering the red zone. And when I speak of red zone, just in case you're tuning in right now and go, red zone? There's a red zone in hockey? I don't see anything that's really red outside of the circles in a line. The area that's in the immediate front of the net, right? So there's that blue paint, there's the crease. Just outside of that, between the top hash mark and the goal line, you refer to that as the red zone because that's really hard to read a shot. It's really easy to set up an open man there and get that quick shot off on a pass from behind the net. And that's where Jake Gardiner faulted a lot. However, he also had a defensive partner that seems to be enjoying the giant umbrella that is named Gardiner because Nikita Zaitsev was just abysmal. He might have even been worse than Jake Gardiner. This is the guy who chased the puck like it had bunny ears. Like, it was just absurd that Nikita Zaitsev wasn't benched. That's how poorly he played. If you thought Jake Gardiner was bad, Nikita Zaitsev was worse. You are not supposed to leave the red zone in front of the net if your defenseman, your defensive partner, is already going and chasing the guy behind the net. You're a defenseman, Charles. This is stuff you learn in type.
Yes, it is. Well, you know, a Russian defenseman or a Russian hockey player who doesn't exactly adhere to the structure, that's nothing new. As I say, you know, if your last name ends in a V, you know, things are going to get dicey. Your work ethic could come into question, your positioning, a lot of things. And not trying to be a darker shade of Don Cherry here, but, you know, it's a lot of freelancing. When it comes to the Russian hockey players, a lot of freelancing has gone on, even though it's a lot of them great talent, great, great skating ability, but it comes to the minutia of the game. But those are things that Mike Babcock is a good coach, and he'll straighten out those things. I'm sure that this offseason in Toronto, it's going to be, there could be some hurt feelings, let's just call it that, amongst a few players and things like that. But he's going to get these things shored up. I think he knows now what he has, what he can expect from every player. And I think from this point forward, this is the crossover now, because Matthew's got another year under his belt. I think now you're going to see Toronto take that next step to becoming a good team. The building blocks are there. Now he knows the character of these players. What can he expect from who in what situation? So here's where I think we get into Mike Babcock 2.0. And going forward, Leafs fans, a lot of hope.
And I've said that since the beginning. I'm disappointed. I thought that after the momentum shift of winning a very important Game 6, that the Leafs could carry that into Game 7. There were bounce backs. They showed character. They went up, they went down. They went up, they went down. But then ultimately in the third period, Frederik Andersen, who overall had a very good playoff. a very good first round. There were games though where he was superhuman.
Yes.
And there were the games that he was mortal. And he was very mortal in the third period. The tying goal, the 4-4 goal.
4-syllable word.
A 4-syllable word?
Capitulate.
Yes.
That's what happened.
Big one. Capitulate. Yes. I still clap to find out how big syllable or syllabic a word is.
Well, it's actually a polysyllabic word when you use it in the past tense. He capitulated.
Not only do you get a hockey lesson, you get a grammar lesson here on Inside Sports Talking Hockey.
Because polysyllabic is a word with more than 4 syllables. Okay, and let's go ahead and get back to hockey now.
Yes,
so
and the Boston Bruins. Yes, sorry. To finish with the Boston Bruins, they outplayed the Leafs. They forechecked really hard. Their forecheck was insane. They dominated in the offensive zone. The Leafs. Just another footnote, Matthews didn't really show up. Out of all the young guns, the one that really showed up was Mitch Marner. I wanted to give him some props on this show because if you're unfamiliar, I know you're out on the West Coast, so there's a very strong chance that your people, and I'm not saying that in a pejorative term, your people, God.
No, your people and you people is 2 different things. I get that. Go ahead.
Okay. But to the listeners, they might go, what? Your people? Oh, I'm not listening to this racist hockey show. I'm not listening to this anymore. This is terrible. No. Mitch
you wouldn't believe what the Jewish guy said to the black guy. He said, okay, let's stay on track here.
But Mitch Marner, I want to say, out of all the young guns, the ones that we talk about with promise that are the building blocks of this franchise, Mitch Marner is a special hockey player. He's not generational like Matthews, but don't forget his name. He's going to be the Malkin to Matthews. Mitch Marner is a special, special hockey player, and he's shown that kind of skill set when it matters in the Memorial Cup. When he played for the Hunters, Daryl Hunter, the big elbow to Turgeon, the villain of Washington.
1993. I remember that. Yes.
Owns the Ontario Hockey League team called the London Knights. And Mitch Marner is a graduate of that program. And the Memorial Cup is the championship for the Canadian Hockey League. And when they won, Mitch Marner had an MVP type showing. And this was just before he was supposed to join the Maple Leafs. So to think that he's like, oh, really? Like, this is where he's going? No, his trajectory has kept going and going for like the last 4 or 5 years. So don't be surprised. Don't be surprised to keep seeing this guy succeed the way he has. So that's my
it takes a little bit for more so than other sports for the NHL players to season and really come into what their role is going to be in the league. But I'll tell you, the only college I ever had was I took one course at City College, and that was in marketing. So here's my marketing tip for Toronto. I say that what they do with this whole Matthews and Marner thing, they partner with M&M's and get a campaign going there. I love M&M's, Marner and Matthews, Matthews and Marner, but let's do this, M&M's. I can see it happening there in Toronto. Lonnie, when you see the commercials come out, let me know. I will file a minor lawsuit. I want my cut, 10%. That's all I ask, 10%.
I was going to say, and that's all you want. And to footnote that, if you're a Canadian listener right now, I'm going to put this out there, okay? Because I know they're different in America, but M&M's are better than Smarties. That's all I'm going to say.
All right. Okay.
M&M's are better than Smarties. In America, you call them Smarties. Up here, we call them Rockets. But in Canada, Smarties is a candy-coated chocolate treat that is an inferior part or an inferior product to M&M's.
I like that. Just as peanut butter M&Ms are better than Reese's Pieces, even though Reese's Pieces did it first. Anyways, okay, let's get on to it. Yeah, I love them.
I'm distracted from talking hockey now because now I got to pick between the Boston Bruins and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Tampa Bay Lightning, you'd think we'd be sitting here going Stamkos, 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 Stamkos. But the tune has changed a little bit to some fella named Kucherov.
Yes.
Cooch everywhere. and get your mind out of the gutter when I say it. Cooch. Kucherov. Like, the guy is setting the world on fire in the regular season. And then sometimes you get concerned. Oh, a guy who's got that kind of offensive firepower, is he really going to be able to pull this off? And the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
Kucherov has been a beast. And that's not to say that Stamkos has been, completely invisible here, right? He's got 5 points in the playoffs, as does Alex Killorn. But then there's the rest of the team. There hasn't been a ton of offense coming out of them.
Well, Jersey plays them tough. Jersey, for whatever reason, they kind of they have their number, and they make it a lot tougher on them. But a lot of firepower for Tampa, and not just those guys. You can go down the lineup. I mean, guys like Tyler Johnson kind of get buried because of the Stamkos and Kucherov thing, but Tyler Johnson's a stone cold assassin when you give him a little bit of room. And here's my concern with this series. And okay, the Bruins won, but my big concern is with the amount of snipers, and that is not just the guys who go to, as they say, the dirty areas there, in front of the net, take the cross check, the stick in the ribs and everything else, but these guys who can just, from 15 feet, can just dead-eye pick corners like you cannot believe. Tampa Bay's roster is loaded with them, and I do not like even though the Bruins won last night, but how many pucks did Tuukka Rask really stop? And really, through the series, what are his numbers? What are his playoff numbers in big games? And they were saying in closeout games, his save percentage, I think, is just a little above 80% in big games. Last night, I think it was 833 was Rask's save percentage. So it gets buried by a victory by the team in Game 7. But when it comes down to playing a team like Tampa, you're going to have to cut those narrow margins there down like that. So the things like, will Rask be able to make a big save? And they even talked about that on the broadcast when a goal was scored. And they said, it's not Rask's fault, really. You can't really truly fault him for that goal. He says, but in the playoffs, you just have to think, can you just come up big just once,
And that's
the problem with Rask.
You need that. And Vasilevsky, you're right. There were some pretty low-scoring games, and Vasilevsky, he's a Vezina candidate this year too. Right. So you're looking at a Tampa team with a lot of offensive firepower. Although the Bruins, I will even give some credit. I mean, Louis DeBrusk came out, and
you mean Jake?
Jake, sorry, Louis' dad.
We love Louis DeBrusk. We all love Louis.
No, sorry, his son Jake. He came out yesterday with a huge offensive output that could add that extra depth, not just exactly having it placed on Krejci. Krug had a nice goal yesterday, by the way, the tying goal from the blue line. So they're getting some spread offense from Boston. But you're right. If Tampa snipers also continue to keep waking up, and you got a guy like Hedman who's the backbone of that blue line, and on top of that too, look, Ryan McDonagh's done all right for himself throughout the playoffs too.
Absolutely.
He was a key acquisition around the key acquisition around the trade deadline. And then Sergachev, he's had a pretty interesting playoffs on top of that. This is a guy who's been a little bit irritating to certain players. And Hedman, by the way, 5 games played, okay? 5 games played, no points.
Yeah.
So he's had
a breakout.
Yeah, so if these guys, especially a guy like Hedman, wakes up, Boston's going to have their hands full, especially like you said, because the goaltending, right? Rask, is he going to be the guy who's going to steal the games for you? You can also ask the same question out of Vasilevsky too.
That's true. Untested, really. And one guy I wish was playing for Tampa is a defenseman, Slater Cuckoo. This has problems as far as developing, but come on, we got a guy with 8 letters in his name and 4 of them are K's. That's just a beautiful thing, and I just love saying Cuckoo. Cuckoo. It's Slater Cuckoo. Cuckoo.
Well, when it comes down to these two clubs, though, I mean, we talked about the strengths, the weaknesses, and there's one guy whose name I haven't really mentioned. I did actually earlier, but in a different context. If all else fails, and they're really struggling. Maybe he signs as a free agent, pulls some executive order, whips out the CBA and says, look, according to the collective bargaining agreement under the subsection of Iserman, I can play whenever I want. Sorry, I had to pull it in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Of course, being the GM of the team, being my all-time favorite player, and the fact that I'm the Montreal Canadiens fan through and through, but I love hockey. I love hockey. And that's why I had no problems rooting for the Toronto Maple Leafs. However, they're playing a team that doesn't have a guy named Orr, doesn't have a guy named Bork anymore, and even Neely. So I can say this, and if there are children in the room right now, this is my Montreal Canadiens heart talking. Fuck the Bruins. Go Tampa. Stevie, you're not going to hear me swear a lot. I try not to pull that out of the bag because still a family-friendly enough show here on Inside Sports. But as a Montreal Canadiens fan, if I couldn't squeeze in at least one F-bomb in regards to Baston, I would be doing a disservice to my heritage and my club of choice, no matter how bad they are.
And, I think the other thing, too, with Tampa is we have to remember just the character guys on the team. So you mentioned Ryan McDonough, but also, Ryan Callahan, Alex Killorn, guys like that. And, hey, the youngster Braden Point playing well, too.
Very true.
There's just a lot of balance up and down the lineup. And I think Tampa, when I watched, they've developed over the past few years, that disappointment in 2015. And, they missed the playoffs last year, but that happens. I like Tampa here. I say Tampa in 6 games. I would say Tampa in 6.
Go 7. I'm going to
go 7. You're going 7. All right.
I'm going to go 7 again from the simple fact that we saw Boston also. Look, I spoke to the mental strength of the Washington Capitals coming back.
Yes.
And you're talking about the Boston Bruins who lost at home to the Leafs. They lost at home to the Leafs during this series. We're talking about a team that, yes, very strong, arguably the best line in hockey. But I think Tampa just has that extra little bit to take out these fellas. I want to see Tampa succeed. I want Stevie Y's promise as an executive to be realized at the NHL level. And so I see them going 7 because it's going to be hard fought. It's going to be hard fought. Yes.
Well, and that's one thing. I'm not trying to sell the Bruins short, but and one of the things that does scare me a little about Tampa is when they get out of sync. Oh my goodness!
They get really out of sync.
And so don't be surprised. I would not be surprised if the Bruins do win one of these games, something like 6-1 or 6-2 or something like that. It probably is going to happen.
I'll give you one that really sticks out here because, like I said, I did fantasy hockey this year. I got a couple of keeper teams. You play the waiver wire. Earlier in the season, Tampa's red hot, right? Red hot. I'm like, all right, I need to fill a roster spot here. I'm going to go waiver wire. Tampa's playing Ottawa. What could go wrong? It's Ottawa. Ottawa won 4-0.
Right.
What? That shouldn't happen. So you're absolutely right. That if there's going to be an X factor in anything in this series to go in Boston's favor is that, like you said, if Tampa plays poorly, they play very poorly. It's not just it's going to be a close game. It's, we're busy hanging out with Fido tonight, so we may as well get all the intimate apparel out because we ain't doing much more other than spending the time with the dog. So
there we go.
Take that figure of speech how you will. Like I said, I try and stray away from the profanities.
Yes, you do. And you do for the most part, you do a very good job of it.
For a Canadian who admires Arlie Ermy, who recently passed away, Gunnery Sergeant Hartman of Full Metal Jacket fame, who I consider the god of coarse language.
Yes.
If I can mind my P's and Q's and manage the F-bombs on this fine program we call Talking Hockey, what you call Talking Hockey, I was saying the Royal we, I think I'll be okay. I think I can do all right linguistically. But then once you turn the power off, it's F this, F that. And of course, I'm talking about French fries when I say F.
Freedom fries.
Freedom fries. Yes. Freedom. Yes. They still call them freedom fries in America?
No, we got over it really quickly.
I was hoping so. I'm like, guys, come on. Grow up a little.
In fact, we never did actually call it. It's one of those things that got publicized, but it never caught on. Even we were like, you know what? It's not the first, we've been in a lot of wars. There's no reason to start changing names of food just because we're in a war.
But hold on. To take a page out of your culinary marketing idea, you had a built-in slogan and a means for Mel Gibson to just make money forever outside of his movies. What kind of fries do we have?
Freedom fries. Yes. Oh, Braveheart. Okay.
That's enough.
And, speaking to that point, before we get out here, just one more thing. I'm surprised that in Pittsburgh, during the height of his career, why did they never sell Yarmir yogurt? I think that would have gone over huge. It's in everywhere in Pennsylvania except Philadelphia. Yarmir yogurt. I mean, that's a no-brainer, but they never did it. Like I said, folks, I took a course in marketing. I was there for the full 12 weeks, I think, and showed up most of the time.
Of course, the lid has to spill over in a nice flow to the very base of the container, because if it didn't have a mullet, it wouldn't be Yarmir yogurt.
Oh my gosh, you've got the slogan and everything. All right. On that note,
this is why we're a good team.
Okay, everybody. Remember, the show is Talking Hockey. We'll be here every week. We'll probably give you an update before we get to the conference championship round. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter at The Inside Sports. Follow Lonnie on Twitter at The Schwartz 5454. That's The Schwartz, SCHWARTZ 5454. And for Mr. Lonnie Schwartz, I am Charles E. Smith Jr. Thank you for watching Talking Hockey, and we'll see you next time.